if you're gonna do the whole Christian thing,
We're
aren't you
live,
supposed to honor thy
but
father? Isn't that like
I'm
one of the
still
core
on a
aspects of
call
being a Christian? But
because
very little.
our groups are still going on with this epic call. So let me wrap up the call. Dudes, I got to wrap up the call because the live stream started. But hey, really quick, man. Number one, I can leave this call going and you guys can talk, which I'm cool with. Alvin or Joe, you're in charge. And you can end it whenever you want. But I want to say this to you, PO, since we're live with the YouTubes right now. Hey, so dash cam footage, that's great, but it needs more. You straight up need more than that. And these guys will tell you all about that. They got it down. So that's good. Don't mind fuck yourself about that. It's good, but you need a spearhead, and the spearhead is going to be a third party, and that's a pain in the butt and all that sort of stuff. Right in the chat, if you guys want to keep it going, either Alvin or Joe have to be the head honchos. Yeah. And okay.
You guys want to keep going? I'll stick around for a while. I'll keep things in line, but I'm probably not going to talk a whole lot other than that because my face fucking hurts.
So he's got the call. Listen to him, respect him like me, and keep going because you guys are on a roll, man. You're doing good stuff. And if you want to come by the live stream afterwards, we'll do it. All right. I'm out of here. Later. And thanks. Okay. Party people on the live stream, we're here, and I'm so happy you're here to talk with all of us. Hopefully you can hear me good. We just did this hard switch from a call. We've gone about 4 hours today on a therapy call, and then we're doing actually it's an open line for all of my groups. It's not just custody stuff, but the custody guys dominated it. So if you weren't on our live stream last night, that was awesome. 4.5 hours. We have epic stuff. That live stream, man, so good. And I think one of the reasons why it's so good is because we had such great participation afterwards. So obviously there's the presentation I'm giving, and hopefully that added just tons and tons of value to you. But man, the awesomeness of the discussion afterwards was just the best stuff. Okay. So tonight we're actually going to wrap up. I think we're going to wrap up this whole free kind of product that I've been trying to put together that takes you through custody and all the things that you need to know. That's high conflict. And also it's wrapping up custody and high conflict that can kind of work for everybody, but you got to realize this comes from 17 years of working with men. And what we're going to talk about tonight is awesome. And what's even more awesome is I haven't rehearsed any of this. So we're like, hopefully this is good. Hopefully it's good for you guys. And just remember, if you're watching this next Tuesday, we're going to be having another live stream with an open community call afterwards to it. So the free community, you can be a part of it and come on and interact. And last night we went on for like 3 hours after my 3.5 hours after my presentation. There was some epic stuff, and even the guys who are on the call tonight they're still on it. You know, the private calls for the paid communities, they were talking about some of the stuff that was discussed because there was some of the best stuff on pro se law in last night's live stream. Guys, if you want to be on those free community calls, you have to be on my email list. If you don't want to be on my email list, that's cool. It's all good. But I hammer that email list with really good content that's for especially men in high conflict custody battles. And I think it's a great, great thing. Okay. Let's get into the content. Let me take a drink of water and we'll get to that there. Feeling alive, feeling good. This is what I look like after doing 4 hours of calls on like really hard stuff, especially the therapy calls we have. They're pretty brutal. And then talking about people's cases and then we're jumping right into this. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen out there, so tonight we want to cover a blueprint, a strategy, a map for going through high conflict custody. And when we're talking about high conflict custody, you know, hopefully by this point, because this is the end of the lesson, we're going over lessons 10 and 11 tonight. You know that that means we just want to be parents. We want to see our kids. We got blindsided by something. Somebody is making things impossible for us to fight, and we're just trying to see our kids. It's not that both parties are causing a conflict here. It's that usually we're being attacked by somebody with a personality disorder and all that sort of good stuff. And that adds a totally different dimension to your custody battle. So there's false allegations, there's parental alienation, there's a lot of narcissistic traits or abuse and all these different things. And I'm just going to tell you right now that we have some live streams planned for Sunday, for Monday, and for Tuesday. Hopefully I can do them all, that are going to have more to do with narcissistic abuse or our takes on this, which is pretty unique, and how to take that and turn it into a custody battle so that it works in your favor in court, which it's probably not doing right now. And then there's a bunch of stuff on false allegations. If you're on my email list, you're seeing the free lessons that I put out on that. I think we're on lesson 4, and I need to get through the rest of them, but they're pretty amazing. And we're going to do some live streams based on that. So all this sort of good content. And so what we want to talk about tonight is this map. We want to talk about how is it that we stay on a map which is planned for 2 to 3 years. We don't want it to last 2 to 3 years. You're probably saying, I don't have that in me, but we need to make that plan, because if we can plan that, if we can plan out this entire map, the strategy, the psychology, the hardships, all of this different stuff, if we can put that in the plan, that is our best win at getting this taken care of in a short amount of time. And I just want to go through this, like, you know, in passing the call on to the different guys. One of those guys came to us in, I think, August of 2024. There were criminal charges, all sorts of parental alienation, false allegations of abuse. And he had to start off fighting his case in criminal. And this is fast. And there were 3 guys that started right around that time. And I can't believe this. This is like such great hard work from them. I'm so honored to have them be in my group and worked with them, because all 3 of them in 6 months were able to get visitation with their kids and start to get to, actually they all got to 50-50. I want to say they got there within 6 months, but it may have been 7 or something like that. And then by the 9-month period, they really tilted and got, one of them is basically about to get full custody. And we'll see what happens, but he already has much more parenting time, but we just got to officially get the decision making and all that stuff on paper. That's fast. That's so fast, right? If you look at the consistency of those 3 men who start off in criminal, right? So it's not just false allegations, you have a protective order, it's worse. You could get arrested, you could go to prison. It's terrible. Criminal makes things a lot harder, but they started there. And in 6 months, that's fast to be able to get to where they can have proper visitation and so on, and then move to 50-50. And at least 2 of them within 6 months got that 50-50. That's fast. You know how they did that is they planned for the long term. Everything about their case had the idea of how it could affect them later. Now, if you're watching this, you're like, how is that possible? You know, this is like an imaginary world, or you're watching other channels or other people talk about this. And there are some great channels talking about custody that are very good. And then there's a lot that aren't. Okay. But you have to start looking at, how is my next court hearing what's going to happen? What evidence could be produced? How could I structure this right? How could I get out, if I'm on the bad foot with the judge, how do I get on the right foot? So that in my case after that, the next hearing, the hearing after that, it's going to work in my favor. And this is how we need to think. And that's how those guys were able to go through this process in a 6-7 month period and get to 50-50. That's insane. You never hear these stories. And I couldn't believe it when it happened, and they all came in the group around the same time. So the first part to all of this is we need to understand that we're in a war. You need clarity, and clarity is not going to be achieved in any other way. Now, I've said this in every lesson. Go back and watch the first 3 lessons and revisit them, because every month you need to be looking at the mentality of winning and losing. it is so obvious to me when I work with people that there's a truly a mentality that will allow you to lose and one that will allow you to win. And these can make sense. They make sense in every other aspect of your of the world, but they punish you in family court. So this could be overconfidence. This could be standing up for yourself. This could be doing what's right or standing up for what's morally good. These are all great things. I'm not against them. In telling you that if you only look at these things without them being checked, they could be part of a losing mentality. This comes from actual experience, but I'm not saying that because they're bad or wrong. They're actually the right thing, but we have to at least accompany them or put them to the side for a little bit with a hardcore legal structure. This is very important. And I really believe that one of the reasons why we have the free community is that you need a group of men for that. Like, for instance, as I started this call, if you guys, or I'm sorry, as I started this live stream, I was wrapping up a call. And I told the gentleman, I said, hey, man, we're live and we're streaming. And I said, look, what you're saying is evidence. It sounds like to all of us, it's going to win the argument with your mom and everybody else. But this is not evidence that is going to win an argument in court. He was talking about having footage of his kids saying certain things that would show parental alienation, all these different things. It's not the way, like, we need something else to spearhead it in order to start to introduce those different aspects of it. So we need to understand that right now we're in an extreme hardship. We need to start adopting the right mentalities towards it. Okay. So always go back and revisit these different ideas, ways of thinking, the philosophies of winning and losing. When you first watch them or study that part of the course, it doesn't mean so much, but every month that goes by, you're going to see yourself naturally doing these things that are oftentimes beneficial in every aspect of life, but they're going to make us lose. Okay. This then ties us into one of the first parts of this roadmap. The roadmap of finding out where you're at and how you can win in custody. And there's principles that are consistent. It gets really, really specific, but we have to start out with the generals of it, the general concepts of it. So first, we have to assess what the threat is. What's in danger here? Now, I get it. Lose your kids, you're losing your dream, you're losing your family, you're in pain, there's a narcissist attacking you, everybody's rewarding them, and there's triangulation, and you watched a ton of videos on this and you can confirm it. And this is usually what we're thinking, but we have to go, okay, what's the legal threat? Okay, the therapeutic, the emotional, the mental, the rebuilding of the life, the seeking of justice, all very important. But every single one of those roads, if we take them and we take them too seriously, it conflicts with the legal. Right? The legal needs to be really clear. So what is the threat legally? Is there a protective order? Are there false allegations? What's happening with those false allegations? Has a judge picked them up? Is CPS involved? Are there third parties already involved? Is it something where I have a protective order, but now I'm going to court for child support or for a temporary parenting plan to be put into place, which may not make sense? Where am I at with all of these different things? Okay. So in this, we have to look exactly what our threat is, where we're at with any threats to us legally. Okay. So usually the threats are going to be something like this: false allegations, protective order risk, parental alienation, visitation interference, CPS involvement, drug and alcohol accusations, domestic violence, psychological warfare. Okay. So if we have those threats, and let's say we have all of them, we have to look at them individually first. So before we can put them in any orchestration of our case, we have to look at them individually. We also have to understand the process of the courts. If we go back and watch 6, 7 of these different lessons, 6, 7, 8, if you have kids and you say 6, 7, you know what happens, right? Right. If you're watching kids, 6, 7 dads, I always say that to them. So we have to look at how does the court handle these different things specifically, not how we think so, not what we've read, not what we've studied. Because a lot of times, if again we go back and watch the first 3 lessons, when we get too much in our own plan of what this narrative is, we stop looking at the narrative of the court. The judge is the boss. The court is the boss. We're playing by their rules. Very important. So with false allegations, what's the process of the court in that? Okay. How does the court handle that? With false allegations, how are these things argued? Does that supersede, or how can it supersede? Like if we have false allegations that move to a protective order, how does that change custody? It changes everything, and we're bound by that. Okay, very important to look at. If there's parental alienation, one of the things is we can't argue this in court, most likely, unless you're in one of our best clients' counties where he helped change the laws for that, not through campaigning, not through arguing online, not through signing a petition, but winning his case and proving so that the judge put it in the books and put it in the ruling, right? If we have parental alienation, we have to realize we most likely can't argue that. So how is it argued? If we've read things like Ashish Joshi's book, Litigating Parental Alienation, it's a big one. You should definitely check it out. It's very expensive, but this is like a book that all the guys who've won in parental alienation cases or changes laws toward parental alienation in my groups through winning their case, they swear by that book. So it's probably a good one. So when they started, it was like $175. Now it's like 120, but worth it. If we can't fight parental alienation legally, we have to go, how do we fight it legally? All right. So technically you can fight it legally. It's just not going to be called parental alienation. What's the process in that? Now, with parental alienation, we also need to understand, how does this affect the kids? Now, this we have not talked about in this entire course that much. But just on our call, this was kind of the tail end of the call. That's what a lot of the people were talking about. If there's parental alienation, this destroys kids. And even you trying to fight parental alienation in the wrong way destroys kids. That's a horrible thing, right? This is one of the, we're pretty open in our groups for different things, but the abuse that parental alienation causes and how we accentuate and perpetuate that abuse with how we fight it wrong is really important. So that's another big part of it. So what about all of this is part of this process? What is part of the map? Okay, so if we go back and we look at this first section, we want to say, what is the threat? What is the threat? Where am I at? So we hear this over and over again in this course. Where am I at? What can I get? What direction can I go? So am I a dad that is being parentally alienated? Am I depressed? Am I not thinking clearly? Am I somebody that can work really hard, but maybe overstep things? Am I somebody that can come across as angry? What rulings are against me? What's on paper? Okay, what is there in front of me? What can I do? And how do I do it? How do I do it in the courts? It's really important to look at, okay? And so many of you watching this, might be saying, Steve, get to the point, get to the point. For real, literally for the last 4 hours, I've been talking to men about these very things, guiding them through it. And we have tons of guys who are on that call who have won really hard cases. And I am telling you, you have to look at exactly where you're at and what that means. You cannot oversimplify it. You can never be arrogant about it. You can never think that you just got it and you can move on to the next thing. I know that's how every other form of success works in life, but you got to be able to work with it. Okay, so if where you're at right now in the threat is accusations of violence, accusations of drug abuse, if you're being attacked by somebody with a personality disorder of any kind, you need to look at, how do you defeat that? How do you move from there? And there's tons of videos on my channel that talk about this. They might be hard to find, but just check out I counted them today. We did 25. This is the 26th live stream in 70 days. And those live streams average about 2 hours. That's crazy, right? So that's a lot of content that in less than 3 months has been produced that breaks down all this stuff, okay? So next thing we want to look at is, after we've looked at the assessment of what is the threat, what is the legal threat, we want to look at then what is the long-term battle map? How does this get charted out? Okay. Now, There was a guy who was on our calls. He has sole custody. He has sole custody of his child. Didn't start off that way. Kidnapping, parental alienation, all this sort of stuff. Okay. He's been to 40 hearings. 40. That's abnormal. That's a lot. That's really crazy. Some of those pro se, some of those with lawyers. This guy gets a lot of stuff. This is one of the best things. If you check out last night's live stream, that's from December 9th, and if you sit through the 4.5 hours of it, somehow you could get to the part where we're talking a lot about the pro se stuff. There's some people that came on the free call that we were giving some of the best perspective on pro se family law in ultra high conflict and getting wins. And they talked about their losses. What you're going to understand is that the long game is part of learning and accepting that the courts work in a really specific way that you have to get. You have to be able to get that. Okay. So let's look at this long-term battle map and think about where you're at on this. And when you think about where you're at, think about what I'm going to talk about next. And I would say it would be safe to say to accept that rather than argue it. So a lot of times people say, no, I'm going to skip, or I'm going to hire, some coach that's going to make me be able to jump past it farther because that's how I did other things in my life. Family court, very, very different. So the family court sequence starts off with this. It starts off with an emergency phase. It starts off with stability building, meaning you land from the hysteria. Usually that hysteria is 2 months, but it could last longer and it could be a little bit shorter. And then you get stable. And the stability is important. If you don't get to stability, you're going to screw up your case. Okay. And then we get to an evidence accumulation. Now you're probably already, in the emergency phase, you've already gotten some evidence and so on, but your mind is so screwed up, it's hard to get the right stuff. So it's good to either work with a legal team, work with a legal assistant, work with a lawyer, or work with a community to help you get that. But after you've landed, you can move to that evidence accumulation phase with a little bit more sanity. Okay. And then once we get into evidence and this sort of thing, we can start to evaluate what our strategy is. And we can start to understand that if we're having hearings and stuff like that, how is it that we start to introduce key players in this? Okay. I have a lot of videos on this. And actually, if we look at, I think it's lesson 7 when we look at different third parties and so on, that we can start to look at that. Okay. And then we move into trial settlement. And actually before that, mediation, hearings, trial, and settlements. We look at that. Okay. And this is huge. If we do not understand this process, so you might, it's like you got blindsided by a divorce or a custody battle or whatever it is, and you don't realize that there's usually a process of mediation. You have to have 2, something like this, and that's to filter out the courts. Sometimes you might be able to skip it, but usually there's 2 forms of mediation. And then we move to hearings. What's the difference between a hearing and a trial? A trial is going to have a jury. Usually it goes over multiple days. In a hearing, it's just in front of a judge and you can have witnesses and these types of things, but they're usually quicker. Okay. So there could be like 10 or 15 or 20 trials in hearings in one day for a judge, but there's usually only one trial. Okay. So trials take more attention and this sort of thing. But some people might have an imagination of what a trial is and they're going to court for a hearing. And they don't realize they're only going to be able to talk for 2 to 3 minutes in front of a judge. And the whole experience is only 10 minutes and they prepared the wrong stuff for it. So just in terms of logistics, you have to understand that. If you do not understand how the process works, you're inevitably going to get it wrong. There's many ways we can get it wrong. Okay. So we want to move through these phases and we want to understand them. And we also need to understand that there's different points of winning and losing in these. So in the emergency phase, how are you going to lose? Getting emotional, talking too much, sharing your story too much, getting angry, cutting people out. You might send bad text messages. You might fight back, all these different things, right? And how do you win in the emergency phase? Generally, you stay quiet, you start to get legal, and you go into some sort of hermit monk mode or something like that, where you turn into a machine of legal research and how to work in family court. And they screw up. That's how you would win in the emergency phase. They start producing evidence against themselves because it's pretty easy to do, as you may know. How do we win and lose in the stability building phase? We don't get stable. We don't take care of our mental health. We don't realize that there's a difference of our mentality, our therapeutic journey with the legal process, the legal research, and how we're actually functioning in our just regular day-to-day life. Now, most of the advice that you get if you're in a high conflict custody battle, everybody's going to give you the regular life advice. Everybody's going to give you the easy therapeutic advice, not the therapeutic advice of somebody going through extreme manipulation and betrayal and all the different things that happen in high conflict, right? And so you have to take those into consideration. In order to get stable, you may not need to hyper focus on the therapeutic side or hyper focus on how you move with your day-to-day life, but you do need to have a bare minimum of those things. And I would encourage you to hyper focus on the legal side of things. And that, if we can do those things, we have the best chance of getting wins in this. How do people win? Well, the other party can sabotage itself and produce evidence for themselves. How do we win? We start to work order in the courtroom. When we start to go to our initial hearings, we learn that we go and we watch family court and so on. So in each of these different things, there's places where we can win and lose. So when we accumulate evidence, man, that's a big one. How do we lose? We covered this in the evidence video, but how do we lose? We rabbit hole down the wrong pieces of evidence. We don't understand how these are going to be argued in a courtroom. We don't understand what the judge wants. We don't understand how that plays into the statutes. We don't understand how precedence in court matters, meaning that before our case, there were other cases that won similarly with that evidence. So we get the wrong evidence, we follow it in the wrong way, we don't prepare for court in the right way, we don't verify the evidence, all these different things, right? So there's ways to win and lose with each of these phases, okay? And we have to understand it. Now, if there's these consistent phases, like there's an emergency, we start going to hearings, we start understanding the court, we got to calm down, we have to co-parent with somebody that's attacking us all the time. If we understand that there's phases to each of these things that are really consistent, and then there's ways that we can consistently win and lose in that, well, guess what? There's things that we can start to predict of what they're going to do to produce bad evidence. There's things where we can structure in our life and start to have faith in, where we could set up, meaning like, let's say we go to our first hearing, right? And they're accusing us of abuse. And so we learn, number one, we need to prove that there's no abuse. We're a safe parent. But now we're going to recommend that we probably need some really good third parties. And because we've watched my other videos and studied these things, we know that a GAL might be necessary, but they're usually the easiest to compromise. Okay, so they could be biased and all, like everybody can be biased, but it can oftentimes not work out for us. But we can also ask for psych evals. We can also ask for custody evaluators. So different third parties it's a lot harder to compromise. So I don't want to say this is an absolute, but even though your ex is a narcissist and cunning and evil and all these different things, custody evaluators, it's hard to slip that through. Forensic psych evaluations, it's hard to trick that. Okay. So that's definitely what we've experienced in our groups. Very, very difficult. Okay. GALs, a lot of times. And we talk about that in the other lesson plans, that with GALs, because there's so much bias that happens with them. This is true, what we see in every state. And some can be great, right? But we also have to know how to communicate with them. So please watch the other lessons on that. It's really, really important. Okay. So the next part I want to talk about in this whole phase of what you're going through now, once we start understanding that there is some sort of map to this, a map to the mental side, a map to the legal side, and we have to really get in line with it. We also need to start understanding when to act versus when to wait. This is one of the hardest things. So this was actually on our call tonight. This guy doing a pro se case, epic, amazing. He's not it's not epic to him, but watching him, you're like, whoa. And he is not on the winning side of it yet. What he's done is pretty amazing, though, and going up against a very high power legal firm, it's pretty nuts. everything gummed up by the courts, DVROs, domestic violence restraining orders, can't see the kids, parental alienation, all these different things, burned by multiple attorneys, all these different things. And he comes to the group because sometimes you got to go like, man, I need another perspective. So to do pro se on that level, you have to be pretty sharp, right? And I'm not trying to say that like if you're sharp, smart, stubborn, you know how to really follow a direction, that's usually a bad thing, but it can be a good thing and bad thing in these pro se areas. And man, you get beaten up pretty hard. You get shaped, you get forged in that sense. But we were talking to him tonight. Well, you can't do anything right now. So you got to wait. When to act, when to wait. When do we stop? Because if we act and there's nothing that can happen, a judge can't make a decision. You're only producing evidence for the other party. So your kids are being abused right now. And you could file something ex parte. You could, but it would wreck your strategy, your momentum, and all the things that you've moved towards. And that these are the things that are very difficult, right? And this is why you need groups and communities. And of course, it's his choice, but there were a lot of minds where he could come to. And actually, we stepped in at one point and said, hey, man, you need an answer. And here's the answer that I'm giving you. I hope it's right. I feel good about it. But I think right now we have to wait. We have to wait because nothing else can happen. Now, think about this and all of this in the emergency phase, the gathering of evidence phase, in the point where you get accused, like let's say you got some parenting time, you know, the custody battle's not really a battle yet, but then all of a sudden it switches to false allegations. When do you act? When do you wait? How do people overreact in that? They send the text message, they argue, they say that we can rationally handle this because that's what works almost always in relationships. But when we're dealing with personality disorders and kids start to be taken away, it flips. Okay, so we have to immediately go, okay, false accusations are being made. This person's hitting below the belt. This now, we have to move into protection mode. We have to take a step back, and now they have to earn our rational interaction with them back. Okay, that's a very important thing to understand. Okay, so when do we act immediately and when do we wait? False allegations, you got to act immediately. What's your action? It's to deny it. It's not to over-explain. It's not to try and be rational. It's not to convince anybody. They're all convincing people that you're an abuser, but your job is to deny it. So you deny it very simply. Okay, it's not true, didn't happen. You don't need to say anything bad about the other party. That could very much work against you, even in social settings. Very difficult, right? Very difficult. But black and white, we can go to the guys in our groups who did both of those things and everything in between. The people that just deny and move on from it do better legally. Now, I get it. It's hard to do. Okay, there's so much we could talk about this, and it's in many other videos. Okay, if visitation is denied, if there's interference happening, act immediately. But how do we act? Do we talk trash? Do we harass our attorney? Do we get mad about it on social media? No, we act in only a few set specific ways. If there's a parenting plan, then we can file a motion for contempt. Okay, we can file a motion to enforce. But there's just a few specific ways where we can act immediately. And if we can't, right, then it generally works against us. So we need to understand that when it comes down to it. Okay, if CPS shows up, we have to act immediately. But how do we talk to a CPS worker? How do we talk to a CPS officer? How do we talk to a friend of the court? How do we talk to a GAL when they get involved? There's certain ways where we do that, and there are videos on that. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to act immediately on that. We are a parent first. Okay, if there's allegations, we deny them. We show that we're concerned for the child's safety in the language of the courts, so that GAL or CPS worker is going to have a certain protocol that they need to hear. We don't try and convince them. We don't tell stories. We tell facts. And then we say, I'm a parent first. I'm a litigant second. I'm also under stress, and I'm in a custody battle. Now, if we've studied this, we also know that we don't say, I'm not affected by it. I'm strong. I get past it. Man or woman, we want to say, no, we're affected by it, but we're doing our best. What would be best is then I could say, well, I'm in a support group. Okay, I'm seeking out some therapy. And you want, like, this should be true, but basic things like that would make the stress that you're under or the pain or sadness or anger that you have show those different workers that you're following their process. I'm not saying it's right, their process of how they see somebody managing their emotions in this. Very important. If you say you don't have emotions and you're just strong and awesome, generally not good. Generally, it's something that does not go over well with those workers. Okay, so in a way, it's like you can be honest, but you have to be honest about the right stuff. Okay, you can't just say I'm a mess and I'm losing it because you lost it right before and I don't know what I'm going to do. It's like, hey, sometimes I'm a mess, I'm losing it, and I'm able to seek help, I have a support network, and I reach out to them often. That's what we do. So when we look at these things that we have to act right away in, there's a process to it. So we have to act right away with protective orders, any court papers, anytime you're served with something. What do we need to wait on? So what are the things we wait on? Well, if we can't solve it immediately through a known process, so false allegations will have a known process, okay, protective orders, all these things. If we can't solve it right away, and there is a way, but we can't get it, it's not going to work for us, then we wait. Okay, and we consult. Okay, what if you don't have the evidence, but you want to prove a point? It would work against us if we put that in front of the court. So what was on the call is there was some footage that came from like a ring thing on a door where of interactions with the children, and they were saying things that would directly say there's parental alienation. But you got to know how your courts work. You got to know where your courts are. And if you don't have the right evidence for that, then you don't have evidence for it. And if you brought it up, it would be confusing. It would be wrong. It would not follow the court's process. And if we understand lessons 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, we need to understand that that process is huge. The judge is the boss. The process is the boss. It is huge. Okay. When do we wait? When you're reacting emotionally. So there's a saying that I learned. I had to go to parenting classes and anger management classes when I was falsely accused of abuse and put in jail and all that sort of stuff. I had to go to those classes, and one of the social workers said, one of the best teachers. Like, so in this part of the false allegations was some of my better life moments. There's so many horrible things about it. We want to find a good thing, but it was going to certain parenting classes. In those parenting classes, Mr. D, he would always say that an angry person is always right. I started to think about that, man. You break it down. When you're angry, you think you're always right. Okay, so you want to calm that down. As I started to work with this after whatever it's been the last 15 years, and working with so many men during all of this, is that it's not just an angry person is always right. An emotional person has to act now. You are always reacting when you're emotional. Now, your emotions are justified. You should be angry. You should be sad. You should feel all these different things in the full spectrum of going through false allegations or whatever your situation is. But you need to understand that this clouds your actions, clouds your mind. And you think you're right all the time and justified. It's good to wait. Learn to wait. Learn to take a step back. Get a support system. Have 5 people. Build your team. Call them daily. Check in. Always have that. Okay? When's another time to wait? Opposing counsel is making mistakes. They get too brazen. Okay? The narcissist gets out of control. They get confident. They think they're on top of the world. It could be better for the sake of your case to wait. So that might mean you're not fighting. If you'd be fighting a low probability case to make headway in court. You might want to wait. And if you don't have, if you need to file a restraining order, protective order, okay, and you know that the courts are going to deny it because of lack of evidence, you need to get the evidence. Now you need to get safe, right? But you need to also look at how this all works, right? What are the probabilities of it? If the judge hasn't shown you how they think yet, you can wait. So, for instance, every time we go to argue a case, we talked about this in last night's live stream or the previous lesson, is when we argue a case, we want to have studied our judge. We want to know how that judge thinks and responds, but we have one trajectory where we're going to overwhelm them with evidence that we know they like, and another one where we play a less overwhelming argument, one, two pieces of evidence to make an argument. Okay, but we're prepared to go hard, but we have to feel it out. If we can't tell how that judge is going to act, we need to control ourselves. We don't go for the overwhelm. Okay, that's usually the second move, which can happen right away. And of course, watch more Family Court so you can understand what all of this is. So timing of all of this works out in strategy. When do we wait? When do we act? And you need to know. And all of this hits such an emergency nerve in us because we can't see our kids. We think we have to act now, right? And we're usually alone. We don't have enough of a support system. We don't have any of that, right? And if we have that, we need to use it. So you need to, I think that's vital. As somebody who has run a community and seen men do some of the hardest, most impossible things with something that's impossible. There's a lawyer that's in our group, and he says, Steve, yeah, you didn't do whatever. You just figured out the thing that was the most impossible thing that nobody can figure out. Now, I wouldn't go so far to say that, meaning family court. I wouldn't say that. But here's the real thing. Here's the real value of what we've done in our groups. It's the group. I hold it together. I keep it there. I see the consistencies. I am a pivotal, massive member in it, obviously, but the group is the value. Why? Because if you're a dad facing false allegations, you're about to go to jail, you want to react in every which way to stop it. But you'll listen to other dads who've been in your exact shoes, who know your pain. You'll hear their story and you'll get it right away. And you'll listen to what to do next, which is oftentimes calm down and act in the right ways. Okay. So let's go to the defensive strategy for false allegations. This is really important. False allegations are unique in family court. So we have to look at how they're entering into family court. They're part psychological warfare. In fact, I would say they're mostly that, but they carry a harsh legal consequence, and the way to argue them is specific. So false allegations start out as not some legal map, not some form of truth, but as an act of destabilization. Now, I'm going to go so far to say is that when you look at the psychology of somebody who makes false allegations, they're not thinking about destabilizing or making up a lie to cause chaos. They're not planning that out. They have impulsive reactivity that move in a direction which follows whatever abuse they experienced earlier in their life that shaped these fears. Okay. So when we get into studying toxic relationships, things like NPD, borderline personality disorder, which I have tons of videos on, especially relevant to the legal battle and exactly how you can structure your case around that, and there will be more. This is not something that is thought through from them. Now, we think that because they thought about a few things, like they filed something earlier on, or 2 years before this all started, they did something that helps legally. They did a couple things where they premeditated things, but they are not geniuses. Or if they are geniuses, they're so overwhelmed by their impulsivity and their immaturity that they're going to have to react upon it. Okay. So when we get to false allegations, which usually there's personality disorders involved, it's safe to assume that. We don't know exactly what they are, and we don't need to. And one of the things you need to know about how to defeat a narcissist in a custody battle is you don't define them by a narcissist. You start studying their actions, your relationship with them, the different ways that you bought into it. You look at their pattern. You look at their pattern, and then you take it to whatever disorders to find the different ways that you can predict and override it in court. Tons and tons of videos on that. Okay, so please watch those if you want to see how men win the impossible over and over again and what we've documented from that. It's all on my channels. Okay, so what we need to understand about false allegations is your calmness is huge, especially if you're a man. That's usually what we're talking to. You're going to be interpreted first by every social worker, every aspect of the court, every third party is going to see you first as a potential violent man, a potential sexual offender, somebody who could be a predator, somebody whose anger could be dangerous. First thing about false allegations is we need to learn to deny, I did not do this, no explanation, no need to produce evidence that is not in front of a court, in front of a judge, in front of the person who you need to convince to not sign the permanent protective order. Okay, so you got to be calm. You have to deny. You have to have clean documentation, exactly how the court wants, which we have tons of videos on that. You have zero direct contact once false allegations start. So anything that could put you in jail, dad or mom, anything that could put you in jail, it stops. No more rationale, no more talking, no more explaining with the other parties. We need to, and we're co-parenting. So it's like you're talking through our Family Wizard or Talking Parents or some third-party app that your court wants. So not just text message, you're talking in only specific ways. You start to understand if there are any orders, you follow them to a T, exactly what they say. Okay. You need to then understand how to assess evidence. You need to understand the worth of witnesses. So don't look, we have lots of videos on false allegations, but just think of it this way. Okay. Because I know what you're thinking. I'm going to bring in my mom and my friends and a teacher that say that I'm not an abusive man. Okay. That's great. But it really sucks if you don't have a witness for the exact charge or the exact claim being made. Find out the date and time of whatever that is. If they have it, it gets tricky with family law abuse because people make it up, right? Everybody lies. When you want as specific as possible of a claim, where, when did it happen, who was there, what areas, what's their evidence to produce it. Now, oftentimes it's just, I was afraid and somebody said this once, or the child said this time, and it's all vague, which is harder. Okay. But you need to really look at how that's exactly argued. It's not going to be with character witnesses or people saying you're a good person. Okay. It needs to be really, really specific. And if you're not specific and you have evidence that doesn't work and what the court really wants to see, and you haven't studied it, like I tell you over and over again to do, you have no evidence. So it's not just that. The comment that always comes in my videos is I had all the evidence there, the judge didn't care. It's because you probably didn't do a part of this hugely complicated process right that you can learn how to do by going to the county clerk's office and asking them for any packets they have that help guide you on that. So this is really, really tough. Hey, Shelby's here. There's no Zoom, and but the guys are on a Zoom call for the paid groups, but I emailed you. Reply to the email. So anyway, what we want to look at is the exactness of the claims being made and how do we argue that? That has to be there. Okay. So witnesses, patterns, all these different things need to fit into the right way. So defense of a false allegation is all going to happen in the first couple months of the allegation. If an allegation sticks, it's because we made a mistake in those first couple months. You might be watching this going, but I'm already there. I already made a mistake. Okay, it's fine. Most of the guys in our group are right where you're at. Okay. And most of the guys, all the guys who have won definitively in our group happened after they made those mistakes in the first couple months of their case. Okay. So you got to look at going, how do I get calm? How do I get a good head on my shoulders? How do I get into my own silence to not produce new things for the opposing counsel? And how do I learn that evidence needs to have a pattern and a language to it? Okay, so you need to stop explaining the truth. Okay, you can to your friends, but I would even say that might not be a good idea. You need to start looking at what does the court want to see? Truth through behavior. False allegations, big, 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 big thing. Okay, so the next thing that we want to look at in terms of the roadmap of how do we produce evidence to win, right? How do we produce a checklist of things where we can move forward towards a victory in a high conflict custody battle when we're being attacked, is we need evaluations and they need to be a scalpel, not a hammer. So we need to look to be a precision surgeon and not somebody that's bluntly coming in and breaking things up. Now, this is difficult because when we're being attacked in family court, there's these big, blunt moves of panic, of claims, of emotion, and all that stuff. And here I am telling you, no, we want to get, we want to get focused, we want to get calm, and we want to have precision. So the more that we're acting like how we're being attacked, even though their argument might be winning at first, we don't want to be that way. Okay, so that's really important. So evaluations are a huge part of this. So we talked about this in the lessons about third parties and so on, but evidence that already supports you. So let's say they didn't show up, you have the ring or dash cam of some footage that doesn't look so bad. Maybe you panicked. This is actually a really big thing in one of our cases where a protective order got massively modified and a judge admitted their mistake in it, is that the father took a lie detector test. Okay. And then when he got a custody evaluator, he started to work his case, with precision, right? And not with blunt force moves. That custody evaluator went, wait a minute. I want to see this lie detector test. Let me see the results. Who did it? How are they credible? Oh my gosh, they were, they had great accreditations and so on. And then the psych evaluator said, oh my God, I want to look at this. Okay, this was huge. And this was part of the stuff that switched his case. Most of the extreme cases that we have in high conflict have a custody evaluator, forensic psych eval. Sometimes it's a forensic psychosexual evaluation. Those are big parts of it. Okay. And none of these started off pretty. They were extreme. They were stuff you would not wish on your worst enemy. They're horrific. And just me working with them, it aged me and affected me. Is really horrible. Okay. And we still do this, every day we're around it. But in those things, you got to understand those evaluators are really important. How they use those evaluators is really important. And what started to make sense, it's like an evaluator likes the lie detector test. Oh, so this can all chain into the next thing. Oh, this is a part of the courtroom process. So if in my first hearing, I start to include an evaluator and they start off not liking me because there's false allegations, my best thing is that I want to start seeing the process of this so I can include all of that. I want to learn the ways to get GALs, who again are the easiest to be compromised, to like me, to see the truth in this. There's a process to it. There's a protocol of what they're doing. And there's a protocol to how they can start seeing you as a good parent. And it's not the like, well, you just show the truth or whatever. There's things you do to be able to talk to them properly. Okay. So judges are going to love evaluations because it's a process of the court. Those evaluators need to see you as stable. If they see you as unstable, that's bad. Okay. So anything that could be interpreted as unstable, that's bad. Like you're only going to talk to them for 15 minutes or a couple hours or whatever it is. Discipline yourself for that. It's hard. You can do it. Okay. You need to be prepared in exactly what they're looking for and what they want, their role in your case. Okay. Now, one of the things is what you need to know with everything with evaluators takes a long time. So everything in family court takes a long time, but their report is going to be dependent on, oftentimes it depends, but on your interview, your assessment, them knowing you for a long period of time, also your ex and the kids. So that's a lot of stuff that they need to research thoroughly if they're doing their job right and putting it in a report. And so a GAL, like I say often, they're usually the sloppiest and skip a lot of these things, but they're usually the first wave. Okay, if you can skip it and get to a custody evaluator or a court-appointed therapist, go for it. Okay, but just know how important those things are and using them right. So what hurts in evaluations is going to be your chaos, your anger, your blame, your resentment, you trying to see them as a judge, like so you're trying to win them over so that custody can be decided. They can't do that. They can write a report that has a suggestion, but if you're trying to get something, right? Remember, so when do we wait? When do we act? But one of the things of when we wait is when we know our actions aren't going to help in any way. So if we're trying to get something out of an evaluator that can't happen, we're failing. Okay, we're going to fail big time. All right, so that's a big one. I see there's a lot of questions here, guys. I'll get to them when I wrap this up, but we still have a few more modules of this to do it. I do this to record content for smaller videos, but this will be like a hour and a half live stream on YouTube at some point. And the 26th live stream in 70 some odd days. Man, that's a lot. That means there's like 50 plus hours that I've put on custody that is ultra relevant for you, that is from experience of guys who have won. I'm just telling you the stories of what we've discovered that is on YouTube for free in like whatever it is, like 72, 73 days. That's pretty nuts. Okay. So don't be chaotic with evaluators. Don't be emotional. Allegations, any allegation is going to have teeth. It's going to have movement. It's going to mean something. All right. You don't know if the evaluator's biased or not. Probably are. You know, they're not trained. They're trained to assess abuse. They're not trained to assess a liar about abuse. Okay. So just understand that. They're not trained for what is actually happening in your situation. Never request an evaluation for your emotion or their emotion. Treat it like surgery. Treat it like it's a process. Understand it. Again, there's videos that talk about this. There's an entire, I believe it was a live stream that is dedicated to how to talk to different people, CPS, guardian ad litems, and so on. Okay. Treat them as if they are somebody who has to make an outside decision that's going to be probably one of the most powerful witnesses in your case. Better than if you had 100 people that were friends and family and even like coaches and stuff like that, that said, your ex is a horrible person and all they do is lie and the child is in danger to be around them and you're a great parent and it would be better for you to have custody of your kid. If you had, let's say 100, let's say you had 1,000, 1,500, and let's say you could press a button, it was just infinite of all of those witnesses, it would not be as important as a third party court appointed witness. So that person needs to stay separate. You need to talk to them in that way. You need to know how important this is. So stop watching the stuff of GALs are unfair and they suck and start going, okay, they're going to come in and be unfair and most likely biased. What did the guys that win consistently do to win them over? Okay, that's your priority. It's in this lesson, it's in this module, or not in this module, but in another lesson earlier before this. But it's also, there's tons of videos for this that I have. There's hours that break this down. Okay, so you want to find that. Now, let's look at the first 6 months. So the first 6 months of high conflict custody are the hardest. You have emergency mode. It's where you make the most mistakes that are going to affect you and your kids, your well-being, your finances, all happen in that first 6 months. If you're in a case that is suffering a tragedy, there's a very high probability that in that first 6 months you screwed up. Okay, and you didn't know because there's nobody to tell you or teach you. And then there's some random people on YouTube like myself or other people talking about this. And it's like, who do you believe? You know, you want to believe the hysterical people and the red pill guys or the military folks talking about mental toughness. Like you want to, and that, like, they're important, right? They could all be right. In fact, I don't care who's right. I want you to win your case. Okay. And that's a real specific thing. It almost has nothing to do with who's right or wrong. It has to do with what's going to win your case. Okay. Because what's going to win your case, you're going to have to be married to the process. You're going to have to learn your judge. You're going to have to watch family court. You're going to have to learn the laws. You're going to have to look at what evidence do you need to argue what you need to argue that have happened before. That have happened before in front of that judge. And that's what you need to do. Okay, so that's what you need to do. There's no politics or whatever. There's no caring about your emotion. There's that. Now, all those things are important, but they're separate than your legal battle. So your goal in the first 6 months is number one, stop the bleeding. Number two, get a support system. Be able to calm down, manage your emotions, separate them from the legal battle. Your emotions are extremely important. I don't want you to suppress them. I want you to get help. Get a support group. You need to understand predictable behavior. What's your predictable behavior? When the narcissist presses your buttons, like they've done your whole life, you have a whole history of this. You just haven't looked at it. And you were chosen by them, you were shaped by them. But that pattern happens over and over again, over and over again. That pattern you can see if you go, like if you were married for 10 years, 15 years, or if you've been trying to co-parent for the last 2 years, that pattern's there. It's there. But you can't see it because again, you were kind of pre-selected for this and you were trained for it. There are free courses that I have on this. Please look. I know it might be drinking like from a fire hose. You can't watch, whatever it is, 50 some odd hours of video on this, but you can select. And believe me, what I know from working with people going through high conflict custody, if you really want to get this down, those 50 hours of videos you well watch over a period of time. Or you can. I know it's possible. So you got to understand there's answers for a lot of these things out there. Okay. So everything in this, you need to start looking at the pattern of it. Okay. When there's orders written by a judge, you follow them perfectly. You don't try and minimize. You don't try and get something for nothing. You don't try and reinterpret it. You don't try and interpret any order that comes from a judge or from the court is in something that you can argue with your mom or your friends of what this means. You look at how that judge wants it to be done and you do that. Now, you could say it's unfair, all that sort of stuff, but then we follow the process to modifying that sort of stuff, okay? So you build consistent weekly routines. You should start focusing on your mental health. That doesn't mean you're weak or bad or insane or whatever. You need to understand that this legal battle, so the strongest men, the strongest men, what do we talk about in Winners and Losers? Who loses? The overconfident man. Why? It's not because confidence is bad. It's because confidence displayed anywhere else in our culture has a clear trajectory. It's not going to work in family court. Things are not going to make sense. But an overconfident man can learn how to compartmentalize those things. So more than likely, you need some therapy. You need some support group. And then you need your shrewd legal mindset. Okay? Very important. All right? You need to understand that emotional messaging will kill your case. Okay? Back to this, we're talking about the first 6 months. These are things that are going to help you win. Impulsive decisions, new relationships, changing your whole identity, however you want to do that, which, by the way, is one of the traits or one of the characteristics of what borderline people often do. Not saying it's an absolute, it's just one of them. But in high stress moments, you change your identity. In the stress of divorce and custody, our identity gets taken away. Our roles as fathers and mothers changes, and we want to immediately latch onto something else. Oftentimes, this can then produce evidence for the other side, not just that we're crazy or something like that, but we might impulsively do something that could be seen as bad in the courts. Okay? Really, really important. You also need to understand that in the first 0 to 6 months, it's all about evidence and learning about it. You should be watching family court. You should be understanding how laws are argued. You don't just look up case law. You don't just study laws. Those are all great things. But then you see how your judge applies those things. How does evidence work in that? What evidence do judges want to see? What makes them stop the case and not want to listen to you? So many people here talk about how they go in front of a judge and they didn't care. And then you could easily say it's biased and horrible, and it probably is. But there's also probably some stuff in there where you could have done it better. So every guy that wins impossibly hard cases in my groups says after months and months and months of having trouble in family court, they start to adopt the idea of what could I have done better? Okay. So stability is going to win. It's going to win your case. Aggression is going to make you lose it. Okay. Strategy of understanding the court system and the process of how different evidence can start to be used for, when we plan out a 2 to 3 year case, that's the best way to make it a 6 month case. So if we want to get a win in under a year, we plan a 3 year case and how evidence can compound on top of each other. We smartly think about it. We understand interrogatories, affidavits, how they're going to be used. Okay, we understand what depositions are. We start to see how it's going to play out over and over again. We understand evaluators. We see how it works in an entire chain. And that's how we get the quicker wins. We plan for 2 to 3 year battles. Okay. And sometimes it goes 6 years and 10 years and all these horrible things. Okay. So we want to look at that consistency of that strategy over and over again. Okay. So part 7 here, the blueprint formula is judge, law, process, evidence. Okay. So if we go back and we look at the first lessons in this, we said the most important thing in this that I'm going from with coaching just tons and tons of men is not just law, it's not evidence. Those are really important, right? It's the judge. Because the judge is going to decide how that evidence is interpreted, how those laws are interpreted, what they like, and you have to know that. So if you don't know the judge, you're going to misinterpret the laws, you're going to think you understand them, and then you're going to go into court and probably piss some people off, which you don't want to do because it's really important. And that judge, whatever they sign, is going to affect your life, and the kids' lives, and the psychology, your well-being, your finances, and they're not responsible for any of it. It's pretty effed up, right? But that's what's happening. And as wrong as you can think that is, that's what you're up against. That's what you got to do. That's what you're up against. Okay, so before we change the laws in the system, and we want to do that, I'm not against that, you got to focus on your case first. Okay, so judge, we study that judge. We study that judge. What did we say in the previous lessons? We study that judge, we watch that judge. And if we can't watch our judge, that's not an excuse to quit. We go over into Dallas County's streaming courts for family court, and we watch multiple judges because really, there's 5 or 6 different archetypes of different types of judges, and we watch them and we start to build a language of it. And that's what we need because, if you've been to court a lot, what else did we say in the first couple lessons? Stop taking advice from people who haven't argued something substantial in front of a judge any less than 10 times. Now, that could be with a lawyer or that could be pro se, but the more you understand courtroom experience, the more you realize how detailed it is. And it's almost never on one thing. There's no loophole, there's no aspects of luck. It's a huge structure. And yes, sometimes you get lucky, sometimes there's a loophole. But if you depend on that, you are effed. You're gone. Gone. Okay. So we look at the judge, we study judges, we learn to think on our feet. If we understand and we've been in front of a judge 10 times, we know that sometimes our judge gets swapped out and a sitting judge comes in. So it's much better to watch a diversity of family court as well as your own. If you could watch your own, that's great. But a diversity so we can get the different aspects of it. How do we argue in different ways? What works? Okay. Then we go back and study the law. We study the law, the family code. And then we go back and watch more judges and we study the law. In that, we're going to start to understand the process. Your court is going to have a specific set process. I don't know what that is. Go to your county clerk's office, find it for different things, every motion, whatever, and then watch more family court. Study your judge more. How is the process favored? Why are people losing? Why do you watch a man or a woman have their life ruined in front of your eyes in family court? Why did that happen? Start to ask yourself these questions. Okay. Then look at evidence. And this is the formula. This is it. You have to do this. So, judge, what do judges like? What is your judge like? What do they tolerate? What irritates them? What pisses them off? How is a judge that hates a father or a mother flip to like a father or a mother? If you don't think that's possible, you need to watch more family court. How does a woman who lost her kids, right? This is you out there, who lost their kids, maybe got put in jail by that same judge, get out a couple days later, and then be able to make an argument that can win over that judge. How does this happen? Okay, if you don't believe it happens, you need to watch more family court. Okay, everybody that is prejudiced and biased wants a reason to say they're not prejudiced and biased. And guess what? There's very few people that follow the rules so well and give a judge who's biased an opportunity to say, I'm not that judge that likes that token male that does MMA or whatever. You know, I'm not that because I did a favor for that guy. Okay. So the judges that signed protective orders against my clients that were masculine men that, you know, had a lot of reasons to not look so like they could be a violent person or something like this. This was actually my issue. You know, my practicing of MMA before it was like is widely accepted when I got charged, like it wasn't as popular. It was a huge part of the profiling of my case, which is stupid. That's stupid. That's horrible that anybody would think that, right? But I didn't study my judge enough. I didn't study everybody. I didn't study the court reporter. I didn't study everybody enough to understand how that was being used against me, right? And how I needed to act in those ways, and how one little action would stop everything and make evidence irrelevant. Okay, because I didn't understand that family court was on presumption and not beyond a shadow of a doubt. Okay, so these things you need to understand. Okay, so judge, the law, process, evidence. If you just study the law, so many pro se dads come here, they study the law and they think they got it down, but they don't know how it fits into the judge. They don't understand the process. They don't understand the order of how things are filed. They don't understand when to talk, when not to talk. Okay, when is the right time to bring up, you know, violations and visitation? Or is that in a child support hearing? You know, when, you know, we need to understand that about the process. If you screw that up, you got nothing. You have no case. If you don't understand how evidence works and you just think evidence works and how you convince your family and friends, you will lose. Family court is so complicated. There's so many ways where you can get it wrong. You cannot randomly figure, well, you can't randomly figure it out. You know how we figured it out? It wasn't random. We went in, we lost, we reassessed, we lost, we reassessed. And we did this for years and years and years because nobody told us how to do it. And we got there. Okay. So you don't win with the truth. You win with what the court can verify. You win with consistency. You win with studying it. You win with assessing it. That is the tenacity. That is the fortitude. That is the discipline. Very different discipline than anything else. Okay. So let's then talk about after 6 months. So first 6 months, all those things I talked about, very important. 6 months to, this is kind of a big jump, but didn't want to make this video too long. If you get the PDF, it's broken up a little bit more. 6 months to 18 months, this is where we have to start looking at, this is where our case is going to move forward. This is where timelines are going to be important. This is where hopefully those times where we were being attacked, having our kids taken away, smeared on social media, all these different things, we're so thankful we didn't react towards those things, because then all that evidence that they put forward might be able to be used against them. So anytime that we have to wait, it's an opportunity for them to screw up. So one of the things you need to understand with NPD, BPD, with any toxicity, even traits of these things, okay, where people have some sort of personality disorder, they want to think they're intelligent. They could be intelligent, but they're slaves to their impulsivity, their immaturity, their hatred towards you, all these different things. There's no logic to it. It's not just for money, it's for destroying you. And they are a child when it comes to that. So if you let them, they're going to produce a ton of evidence for you, but you got to let them. If you react to them, you're producing evidence for them. That's just how it works. Okay, which is really horrible. So in this 6 to 18 months, hopefully everything's calm. Hopefully you're not devastated. Hopefully you've learned how to communicate with attorneys. Hopefully you've watched my videos and looked, and this is missed out in this, but it's in the other videos in this lesson. You never want to have an attorney mad at you. You never want to have a judge mad at you. They could be unjust as all hell. And that goes for GALs and everybody. Everybody in this whole system. You don't want them mad at you. They could have been horrible. They could have lied. They could have betrayed you. They could have betrayed the Constitution. They could have betrayed all of everything and ruining your kids' lives. But if you get angry with them, like who are you convincing? There's no reason for them to have to change for you. There's none. So yeah, there's no accountability. It's all horrible. But if a lawyer or an attorney, if a lawyer or a judge is angry with you, it only works against you. So if your lawyer is screwing you over and you don't know how to communicate properly with lawyers, and we have videos on this, okay, if you don't know how to do that, you're setting yourself up for worse things. So you have to learn how to communicate with hard things. Your lawyer gave you horrible advice. Your lawyer is being unethical. How do you communicate properly? So in this time, you have to learn that. If you do not learn this in family law in the first 6 months, let alone the 6 to 18 months, you pretty much can't have a lawyer, or you're gonna always fail at it. Okay. I get that it's not good news to deliver, but again, this is part of the structures of winning. Okay. So you build communication logs between you and the other parent. You start building a record of what a positive father looks like. Like you show up for school lunches or field trips, things like that. Okay. You have witnesses that are third parties that are not family members. You've started producing witnesses based on the court's process. And these would be like the GALs, friends of the court, custody evaluators, and so on. It's better to have the evaluators. You understand what expert witnesses are and what expert opinions are. You don't get in arguments at schools. You don't get in arguments in doctors' offices. Why? And a lot of bad things happen there because it's very easy. Like you could be right. Like let's say in your parenting plan, it says you have medical decision making. Okay. You show up to the doctor's office and you get pissed off. That doctor is allowed to kick you out. Now, all of a sudden, you have lost your rights due to their right to being afraid of you or whatever. They can make all these excuses. So to school, I had rights to see my child, and they said I couldn't pick up my child. And then they said, well, wait, you can. I said, no, I'm going to call my attorney now. And I said, I want to see everything. And they had said that I was taken off of the whatever pickup roster. And I said, well, I want to know the records of that. Who took me off? It's like, was it your mistake or was there some sabotage happening? Did the mother of my kids do this? And at a certain point, the school said, we don't feel safe. Now, here's the trick. If they say we don't feel safe, that's their right to do that. And they can make a very small case for that. So they could get involved. They could get involved in my custody case. They could stir up gossip that affects and hurts my relationship with my kids and empowers somebody trying to attack me. But if I am read in some way that they just need to tell the police, right, that they're afraid and they don't need any justification for it or very little. Like, in fact, there was audio and video which proved that this was a lie. They could cut me out of that, which didn't end up happening. But you need to understand how this process works. Okay, and this happens over and over again. I talk with dads all the time. Schools, they mistreat parents a lot. And they're not trained and they don't understand. And, the school district's legal team can tie everything up if they want. And I agree, they should be sued and destroyed and principals can be fired. And I think that principal did, not because of me, but probably because of other stuff. But that's horrible, right? This is a horrible thing. Okay. So we need to understand what patterns of interference are. We need to understand how they're argued. We need to understand what stability looks like. And we need to start building a narrative of all this. So in this 6 to 18 month time, when we're learning about the law, we're starting to argue our case, we're getting it down. We've calmed down a little bit, and then it can trigger up to get out of control. We need to understand how to structure our case and our image in the family courts that matter. What ties so many people down is we get into this image of of trying to argue why we're not an abuser to people that were our friends that are saying they're neutral, but really they're taking the false accuser's side. Real common. Okay, that sucks. I don't have an answer for you for that. My answer for that is that you need to cut those people out and you may have no friends. It's horrible. I understand that. But you focus on the court. You focus on what the argument is and you stop producing evidence through your anger and emotions and all these other things for the other side. Okay? So, very, 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 very important. Okay? What we want to look at then is long-term positioning. So, if we remember, I said we want to focus for 3 years on all of this. The best way to get a under-year victory in family court is to build the 3-year case. Okay? So we want long-term positioning. We want to look at this. We need to know that we're building a relationship with a judge. A dad that walks in with false allegations, that judge is mainly going to not like him. But by 18 months, I want that judge to have flipped and realized that mom is a liar and that judge was manipulated in there. Okay, that's a lot of time. And those are probably like 3 to 5 hearings where that judge is going to see that. But you're building a relationship with that judge. That's huge. You're going to most likely see the same judge the whole time. Okay. So you want to look at what does long-term stability look like as a parent? What is a long-term, remember when we're talking about CPS, I'm a parent first. How am I a long-term stable parent that now has a history of making the right decisions when it started out being accused of violence or whatever it is? Okay, how is it that not only am I a long-term parent that cares for my kid, how am I a long-term litigant? Somebody that argues in court and does it right, that follows the process, that had many reasons to be angry and hateful. And maybe that judge saw me angry and hateful for the first couple times, but I learned to calm it down. In the cases where judges have stopped and said, this was a mistake, that, my client, the father usually, is not an abuser. You have to stop saying that. That case started out with that father being angry in court all the time. So anytime that flip happened where a judge obviously started to stand up for a dad where it started out with false allegations, that dad did not do well the first 2 hearings, maybe 3. So we have to understand that this long-term relationship is important. And if you failed in your first couple of hearings, you can do much better with it. You can win them over. You have to believe that. Every time the court is telling you a way it's trying to convince you that you will fail and you should give up. And it's real easy to give up. If you have to give up for mental health, I'm okay with it. If you have to give up because you just can't do it, you ran out of money, I understand. But if there's a way where you could go forward, where you just need some information, you need some support, you need some people to back you to say, like, we understand, we've been there. There's answers for that. Okay. And within our groups, we offer that. And there are times where it's like, hey, dude, if you need to give up, take a break for mental health, let's do it. All the guys who won law-changing cases in our group, I've told that to. I've even said, I think you should stop. You need to stop for a little bit. And if you choose to go on or you choose to stop, I got your back either way. Because that's what we're here for. We're not here to just win by what society standards are. We're here to win in our personal relationship and commitment as a parent. And if that means it's going to kill you, you have to stop. And this is like a very important thing, right? When we make it about winning and losing, who's popular on social media, who can get the clicks, we create misinformation for men that actually does kill and harm them, or moms. It's horrible. So in this long-term path, we have to start having faith in the predictability, what our ex is going to do, how they're going to attack us, what the arguments are. We have to have continuity in how we react and respond. Okay, we have to understand what clean evidence is. We have to understand that over this course of 18 months, 36 months, whatever it is, right? This post 18-month period, that maturity, structure, and the process of the court absolutely wins, and that emotions contaminate it. And it will only lose at that point. Emotions, reactivity, the big blunt moves will wreck your case after a certain number of appearances with a judge. Okay? Very important. So, how is it that we survive through all of this? Now, I obsess with you guys about the laws, the structure, the process, judges, how we deal with this, the first couple months, how we deal with false allegations, how we deal with parental alienation. And one of the reasons why, when we started this, I was still on a call with guys. And what we were actually talking about on that call was how we are fathers talking to our kids about it. Okay. This is actually a big thing in our groups. I don't talk about this enough. So there's a pretty hard line in our groups that we don't tell the truth. We don't bring our kids involved in it. We don't create choices for our kids to make. So we don't try and convince them when they're brainwashed. So in our group as fathers, when they're brainwashed by a mother that we're evil, we don't try and make them choose. Again, it's kind of back to evidence. That's not true. We're not going to discuss this. You can love your mother. You can love us. And there's a long story to it, but we're not going to talk about this today. We may not talk about it for a long time. Okay. Because it's not right. Okay. So one of the reasons for this is therapy is a huge part of our groups. And this is hard because there's so much information. Well, I'm going to stand up for it. I'm going to involve my child in the chaos of high conflict. One person attacking another who's trying to be a parent. So already that child's being involved, and then we're making them decide more. So there's really like no evidence of involving a child in that, helping them out in any way, mentally, emotionally, long-term relationships, and it creates a ton of stuff. So there's so many of these different aspects of it. Okay. There's just not anything good. I get it if you want to say I don't believe in psychology and I don't believe in, whatever, and the liberal media, the conservative media, whatever it is. There's none. You're having an empty argument of saying that something's wrong so you can do what you feel. Doing what you feel fails in family court. Okay. Doing what you feel also fails in any relationships that could be rebuilt from tragedies in family court. Okay. So, in survival of all of this, we have to understand that our orders, we can't break them. We could talk about them. So, after 2 years and things calm down, or maybe it takes 10 years, you say, hey, you can have them this weekend or whatever. But we do not break our orders. Okay. We do not over explain things. At the moment of false allegations that could have heavy consequence for us, we do not try and be rational with somebody who's stepped over that line. They really have to earn it back, and they would need to do a lot for that. Okay. We try and have our jobs stable so that we can maintain our jobs and work and our place in society, whatever that is. But we need to understand that we need to be a part of society. It's so easy for men and women to isolate in this and disappear and not believe in anything because you've been failed by everything that you did believe in. Okay. We don't want any new allegations to come about. So one of the things about me is I grew up with some pretty crazy stuff. Okay. I hate child abuse now. I hate it. As somebody who has a criminal charge, a felony charge of child abuse, which was later admitted to be a mistake, but it still happened. I didn't really have an opinion on it. And now I hate it. I actually really dislike all of the people talking about child abuse online so that they can use it into politics and hate somebody or have a popularity contest. Dude, I don't care about any of that. I just want to help people to not go through abuse of the court systems. I want to help protect kids that are victims of false allegations and the abuse that happens there. And that takes hands-on work. It doesn't take me having an opinion about a political figure or whatever it is. Okay, that takes hands-on work. That's part of the result of me going through this and having this job. Okay. I want you to also understand that the survival of this, if you got into a new relationship, that's great, but don't repeat the same mistakes in this. When men and women say they lied to me or they're bad and I don't need to change and I'm a victim, you were a victim. But you're also shaped by this. You need to unwrite and rewind many things, and that's very hard. Okay. Do not chase anything that you could change that will harm your kids more. So this could be love, this could be bad habits, bypasses, all these different things. And I think that this is one of the most important parts of it. Okay. Don't create new chaos in your life. Do not create self sabotage. Your survival in this is part of a huge strategy. It's a part of being able to build this legally in the right way while also working on your mental health. Okay, most men lose because they're burnt out emotionally, they're tapped financially, and it's easier to give up. So this is when I tell dads, like sometimes it's so hard, it's best if you stop because you'll die. Okay? But what's even better is if we can focus on this high stress legal stuff, work on survival and our mental health, and then we can start building a better life within that. That's how it happens. It's not like you run and do a marathon or get some big achievement. Those things are great. Actually, after this, I try and run every day. I'm going to run after this at midnight and then meditate. Big things in my life, right? So these are things that I actually don't talk about on here. And I devoutly do them. You don't need to do them, but they're things that are super important in my life. There's people that talk about like fitness and whatever and like our authorities on it or meditation, and they do not do these things as much as me. That doesn't make me better or worse, but I just think it's an ironic thing. The reason why those things are important is because it allows me to deal with the insane stress of working with people who are at the worst points in their lives. Very, very hard. So when we go through these tough times, we're going to build things. If we're focusing on our mental health and our health, we're going to build things that are going to help us overall. Okay, so it's very, very important. When we look at the path of survival in this, we need to understand that survival needs to turn into stability. So remember, this starts out in emergency and chaos. We need to survive through that, turn it into stability so that we can win. Any family court win, my last win was definitive. There was nothing that really could have happened. I would have had to really screw up to not dominate. And I've lost big time too. Okay, my last win didn't really mean much if I couldn't then recover to be a father, to help my kids who are being forcefully taken away from me, to deal with the pain that they're going to have from that, to deal with a father that's in perhaps a mother that's going through some issues. Like for me, it was very depressing. It was very hard, to understand that that was the most important thing. I needed to build stability out of survival. When I got the win, it was good for a day. It's good for a couple hours, but I needed to change. I needed to build my life myself. And you know what's actually ironic about this? Like there's all these things of where people are standing up on mountains and doing all this cool travel. It's another thing I don't talk about. I was actually thinking about doing this niche when I was looking for new niches in 2019. There were things with plant medicine and addiction recovery. I was looking at that. I have a tremendous amount of experience with working with people in that. Watched lots of people die, but you hear about that as not necessarily the truth, and that is horrible. Also, being able to live abroad. That's something I've done this whole time since 2019 and on. Live in multiple places, multiple homes set up. Everybody thinks it's cool. I was technically doing the cool stuff, right? But what did I care about? I cared about my life my case, all these different things. And so there's these people that broadcast this message of what it is to be cool and happy that I have lived. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's nice. I do it for a reason. I can tell you all about it, but it doesn't make me cool or special or necessarily happier. It's what I do with that. So you need to go and stop the bleeding. You need to stop making mistakes. That's what survival is. Okay. You need to stop believing in the BS solution, the false solution that is given to you about social media, of what it means to be a dad, what it means to be a mom, what it means to have worth. Because these are all the things that people jump at. Okay. You need to start looking at what stability is about, is learning the laws, the courts, the system, learning the predictability, learning the reactions that you have, understanding your judge, understanding the language of the courts. And when it comes down to winning, you need to show that you are a parent first, you are a litigant second, and you're somebody that is in the process of rebuilding your life. And what I mean by that is everything in family court is you are a parent first, but as they see it, not how you see it, as they see it. Secondly, you're somebody that is arguing the law. You're a litigant. You're somebody who's going in, who is asking for the help of the state, the government, whatever you want to call it, for your parenting rights because it can't be decided. And you are to follow that to a T. But if that doesn't result in you winning in every aspect of your life, being a parent, being there for your kids who are going to be emotionally distraught and have problems from this. I don't care if they get good grades and hit all the markers of whatever stuff. If you do not win in that way, you lose. And this is such an important thing for people to go through. Why I made this whole thing. So when we go through it, the mentality of winning and losing. Why did I make that? Because all those people in, let's say, a 36, 48-month process, I watched them fail through those philosophies of winning and losing. Why do I have videos in this series and many other things about the process? Because so many people get it wrong. Why do I talk about the judge? Why do we talk about studying the laws and the different loopholes that come in that? Why do we look at how do we talk to third parties? Because these are mistakes that happen over and over again. And why I actually made this was because this being the last video in this series, it's December 10th, because in the week of, I think, November 21st through November 27th or whatever, all that Thanksgiving time and pre-Thanksgiving, I did private calls for hours with multiple of my clients. And so much of the basics they were missing. So much of my community is built on the pain of men failing and trying again and us coming together and saying what works, because nobody helped us, right? That we yet again found another hole, a chink in our armor, which was we don't understand the basics and there's repeat mistakes. So I said I wanted to put together a course that if anybody were to hire me after this course is out, I could say, watch this video because it will tell you exactly that. I want you to know this. So I want to encourage all of you people, if you're not on my free list, get on it. There's a ton of information, but this course is going to be in the modules of that. It's an 11-part video series, PDFs, all that sort of stuff to go and learn about family court, the basics. That if I were to ever work with you on the highest level of me personally, one-on-one, all that sort of stuff, right? I'd encourage you to do my groups first, but if you're working within the highest level, you have to know this. You have to know this because it works, okay? And if you don't think it works, then I would argue you don't understand the reality of the family court system. Hope you enjoyed it. I'll answer some questions here really quick, and then I got to go run and meditate and try and get in bed by 2. So how can I join your group, sir? Well, if you go to my profile on TikTok and you click the direct.me/Steve Maeda link, there will be something for the high conflict custody group. You put in your email address and you go and sign up, and it is there. Oh man, there's some good stuff. Where am I located at? I'm in Austin, Texas, at least now. And then I live part-time in a bunch of other places. Okay. Steve, you have such an amazing program. Hey, thank you. All right. Staying calm and being able to see the full process is like a satellite view of a battlefield, and it's pure gold. Well, thank you very much. Thank you, YouTube. YouTube is nice. And sometimes people on YouTube give me money. All right. Shelby's here. She was awesome on the call last night. Marathon, not a race. It's possible. Okay. Attorney told me not to, and he'd make sure I got this dropped since I did nothing. Okay. The judge granted the DVO on me, even though she committed the abuse because I didn't file one. My attorney told me not to, that he'd make sure you got this one dropped. Okay, so this is interesting. So when we get into false allegations, we think that filing allegations back is going to help us. Some of our guys in our group have done that, but usually it's seen as retaliatory. So we get into this thing like, okay, if real abuse is happening, we're not supposed to put it out there because we may not have known it was abusive, but we're supposed to stop because now we know it's abusive and we go, man, it's there, but we're supposed to not talk about it because abuse is actually, they filed one against us first. It would be seen as retaliatory. So legally, if you're being abused, you should be able to get a protective order. That's the right thing. In family court, there's different probabilities and strategies that get talked about. So it's actually, would be technically not doing the right thing. I don't know if it would be breaking the law, but to not file the domestic violence restraining order or whatever it is when you're in danger, or to suppress that information. That'd be the wrong thing to do. But in the reality of different strategy and possibly what your attorney's saying is it could be read as retaliatory and get a judge to not like you. Okay, now, whether that's right or wrong, what we have to look at, what would be the right way to do it? What would be the right way that our judge would be in favor of it? And what would be the wrong ways to do it, which is kind of what I'm assuming your attorney is saying, would be the ways that would make that judge mad. We'd have to look at that. And at a certain point, you got to make a break. You got to make a decision. And normally that decision would most likely lean towards not making it because it would be very easily seen as retaliatory. Now, there were 2 cases on our call tonight where fathers did that. Okay. And it did work out. And oftentimes, actually, one of those times, we'll say it didn't work out. It worked out in one way of it was dropped. Both were dropped. Okay. So if you're really being abused, then that doesn't work. But it did work in the sense that now you don't have to deal with you being seen as an abuser. And what you would need is to have another violation. Like if she's really abusive, she's going to do it again. Okay. So you have to wait for that, which is horrible, right? So men's issues in this way don't work. If this happens to women, it can work oftentimes in their favor. And there's all sorts of things to it. But look, I'm just going to say, like, a lot of dads will never have the opportunity to get a lot of the things that happen to them so easily. They'll just never be able to do it. And that is a sad, sad reality. Okay, do you have some other place besides TikTok to talk about your group and join? I don't want to touch TikTok. Yeah, no, my group is not through TikTok. TikTok is a social media app that you can have live streams on, just like YouTube. So my group meets through Zoom. The free group meets through Zoom. And we have calls. So they're independent of YouTube and TikTok and all this different stuff. So no, man, join. So if you're watching on YouTube, underneath this video in the description or pretty much any of my other videos, there's something that will be a high conflict custody, a free high conflict custody portal. I forget what the actual words are. I could look it up. And then in that, you put in your email address, and then you'll be notified about our free calls. In the month of December, this is December, we're going to have one more free call on Tuesday, and then things are going to get kind of crazy. So I'm not sure after that, but we try and do 3 calls a month, and we're probably gonna. I don't know. I don't want to put. We'll probably do we'll sneak in one on Sunday or Monday, but we're definitely doing one on Tuesday this week, and we've already done 2 in December, so we'll probably end up with 4. Those are all notified through the email list, and the email list has like a ton of awesome stuff. It's really really good. Okay. That being said, I'm gonna go run and do my meditation and get good so I can survive and keep my mentality with all the chaos. You know, before this, there were 4 hours of group calls. Well, one was a therapy call, the other one was focused mainly on custody stuff. Therapy call was dealing with narcissistic and abusive relationships, which that group has women in it, but it's from a select few. I'll start advertising that female portion of the group at some point in 2020, early 2026, probably at the end of January. And it was just a lot tonight. So we did about an hour and 45 minutes of this stream, and 6 hours of talking is enough for me. I hope you enjoyed it. I do this so that you guys can win, and I'm really sick of watching parents lose, listening to misinformation, and a lot of the crap out there. Hope you guys are good. We'll talk to you guys soon. Like, follow, all that sort of good stuff. It helps with the algorithm so that people can get the message that need to hear it. I'll talk to you guys later. Oh, look at that. I made 1 cent. I made 1 cent on TikTok. That's what my live stream got me. Which, in so many ways, why are you still making noise? I turned the freaking phone off. Obviously, I do these live streams not to make whatever money. I make my money from only having my groups, which I hustle for and all that sort of stuff. You know, I'm always selling them, but they work and they deliver an excellent, excellent product in an ignored thing. But we try and give as much free information out there as possible. So I dig it. Keep it up, dudes and dudettes. I'm out of here. All right. Talk to you guys soon. Have a good night.